first, how you feeling today? How's your day going?
Good. Busy, but in a good way,
Busy in a good way?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I can imagine. So I'm gonna start off with just a few questions of understanding your political background a little bit more.
Sure.
And we'll go ahead and transition over into more Parks and Rec type of questions. And my first question is really simple. It's just what originally got you started in politics in the first place?
Yeah. So I actually started my career in the private sector in finance
Mhm.
and I'm from the Philadelphia area, but I spent about 7 years up in New York. And I worked for Wall Street actually. And but stay with me here. I I worked on Wall Street at a company, Bear Stearns, doing trades with local governments across the country. And I saw how a lot of governments didn't make the best decisions for their governments just because they didn't have the financial expertise. And so I really wanted to go work for government because I'm very idealistic about making government work. And I felt that, government needs to work for people. So I left Wall Street to come back to Philly in '08 to be the Mayor Nutter's city treasurer. So then I was the city treasurer for 2 years through the Great Recession. Then I was budget director for a little over 5 years. I was chief administrative officer for 1 year under Mayor Kenny, which I was responsible for about 1,000 employees. The back office function of the city. So HR, IT, procurement, facilities management. And then I decided that I wanted to run for office at the end of 2016. And it wasn't something I thought I would do before then, but I really just saw so much within city government that the politics needed to change in Philly for government to truly work. Well, that I saw things that from within the system, from, a budgetary perspective that, well, something really should be changed. But, that contract might be connected to someone else politically connected. It's not things happen that aren't in the best interest of people. And to me, I mean, again, this goes back to my idealism, but the purpose of government is to work for people. That is the sole purpose of it. And so I just said, you know what? There's a lot of backroom dealing in Philly politics. We have to make things more transparent. I really wanted to impact government in a way that I could make it work, like truly work. So I decided to run for city controller because it's the financial watchdog and I have a financial background. So I ran for controller in 2017, and that race, I'd never run for office before, never even worked on a political campaign before. So, I didn't have the support of the Democratic Party, even though I'm a Democrat. I had the support actually of one Democratic ward leader out of 69. I won with 58% of the vote, which to me speaks volumes to the change that people across the city want,
Right.
That want government to work for them. So for 5 years, then, I was the city controller for the last 5 years before deciding that I wanted to have an even greater impact to run for mayor.
And so you was definitely city controller for until you decided to run for mayor, and that's when you went ahead and resigned the position, correct?
Yeah. So I was a city controller for 5 years, into my second term, and then resigned, and did a lot of great work. I, of course, did the financial audit function of my office, but also leaned into some of our city's most pressing challenges. I worked on gun violence and what other cities are doing to reduce levels of gun violence, and I urged the mayor to do more here. I looked at service delivery, like trash collection, for example, showing the inequities of it by neighborhood, so these things need to change. And I did a work on a wide range of issues at the city and put forth thoughtful recommendations to make change happen. But that's where the power of my office ended, because only the mayor can oversee and truly direct the operating departments. So that's when I said, you know what, I'm gonna run for mayor.
I could definitely see where, it's almost like you're trying to get more hands on with it and actually say, you know what, I can see where these changes could happen. And it seems like, even though a lot of things are probably that you gave to the mayor to look over, they probably didn't fully accept it or fully try to look through. So I can definitely see where that could be frustrating. You're like, you know what, let me put matters in my own hands.
Yeah, exactly.
So I do want to ask, since you've been in like finance for so long, and especially throughout, the city of Philadelphia, where you're able to overview all of our audits, like you just said, what would you say would be your, I can't find a better word, your dream budget? So how would you budget everything over for a city? So that's going for police department. I saw that before, the week before you went ahead and left, you did do something for the police department, financial, I forgot what the word was, but so
the audit.
Parks and Rec, school systems, what would your budget look like?
So to me, it's not just budget. Budget's very important, and I know the budget inside and out, but it's also about operational excellence. And what I mean by that is, in as controller, that my office's audit of the police department. So the police department, we spend 800 million a year on policing in Philadelphia.
Right.
But what the audit showed was that there's serious issues with how that money is utilized. So out of a little under 6,000 officers, only 2,500 are actually on patrol. The vast majority are in specialized units or doing desk work. And we need to pull the officers from desk work out to patrol, and then have civilians replace the civilian desk jobs. This is one example of how we can get more police on the streets for the same amount of money. So it's not always about more money or less money. It's about, let's make sure we're more efficient. Now, sometimes things do need more money, and I'll get into that. But there's a lot of spend that the city has that does need to be looked at for business improvement, operational excellence. Like the police department, we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support the hardworking police officers, and also make sure that residents are getting true safety from the police. So I think, though, with that said, I've advocated as city controller to replenish funding for Parks and Rec and library, because those services for Parks and Rec and for library incrementally it's what's necessary to make a big impact could be a few $1,000,000. And my view on that, and I released an alternative budget to the Mayor Kenny's budget in 2020 after the pandemic hit, to say, here's a way to balance the budget without raising taxes and without these severe cuts to the arts and some other services, that we need to fully fund our rec programming, our libraries, because that's where our kids go. And my daughter is 13. And I see, she's in public school system. She goes to Greenfield. 26, which is a great school. And I want every school to be, that great. But we need to fully fund. My priorities are such that we need to make sure that there's really good rec programming, that there's good library hours in all of our neighborhoods, especially ones that are hardest hit by gun violence and that have the most serious disadvantage, just because we need to make sure that we're giving everything to the kids. So that is very much prioritized. In terms of education, schools have a separate budget, but as mayor, I would push the state very strongly to provide the necessary funding to fix our school buildings. There's no way we can do that alone at a $5 billion cost. We need the state and perhaps the federal government to assist. But they must assist us, because it's not acceptable to me that our kids are in buildings that are unsafe with asbestos and with lead, and our teachers too. Like it's not right. And we have to fix it. So, to me, it's about looking first to say, can a department, can a function, do better, do more, within their budget, but then sometimes we need to increase it, like with rec and library.
Interesting. So, question for you then. So in terms of, just going back to Parks and Rec for a second, Philadelphia spends $50 per capita each year on Parks and Rec operations, while Baltimore does spend $127. So, I don't even gotta ask, do you think that's enough? Because clearly you don't, but what do you think would be a more acceptable rate, for Philadelphia to at least get more, to at least start making an impact on the community?
That's a great question. And I wouldn't want to give a dollar figure. The way I would look at it though is, what would it cost to, like, what is the current status quo of the Parks and Rec programming in the rec centers across our city? And then as we, what will it cost to have after school programming every day, as well as weekend programming? So what does that look like, and what is the cost structure of that? And then see how much more we can give. It's always a balance, looking at what revenue we have available, but I feel that it's a necessity to have. I actually do think that creating a good community is the basis of health, right? And so the kids need somewhere to go. I mean, they need activities. And also, when kids are not, when they're not in school, you want them doing things that are productive and that might spark some sense of interest. And so that they can figure out, oh, I'm into this, or I'm into this sport, or I'm into this book or this art program. And it gives them excitement. And that's like part of figuring out who you are. And so that's important to me to prioritize that and make sure that we have parks and rec programming, library, as well as arts programming across our schools.
I definitely agree with that. And I even question, do you think that there might be even a form of a relationship or a relation between us putting more money into Parks and Rec, or even getting more programs, or whatever the case may be, and let's say the violence that's happening around the city? Now, I do know that the age for violence is definitely getting younger and younger. And so, like you're saying, like, we're trying to get more kids into these activities and into something that interests them. So do you have a feeling that it could possibly put somewhat of a dent in the crime rates?
Yeah, just from a common sense perspective, it seems like that would make sense. I don't know of any study that shows that, but what I will say is, if you keep kids out of trouble, if you keep kids doing an activity, they stay out of trouble. And, teenagers are always a bit of trouble. That's part of being a teenager. So, and every adult understands that, because every adult was once a teenager. So what we need to be doing is giving the kids something to do, and something productive to do, something where they can blow off steam. They can sort of an outlet to get their mind off of whatever is bugging them at school, or at home even. And it also gives a place for interaction with other adults that could be mentors, whether it's in the rec system or library, or, you know, even with arts programming, it's important to build those connections. So I do think it's completely connected. And I did a lot of work as the city controller in the intersections of our current situation of, for example, the violence that is predominantly occurring in 14 zip codes. Those are the same neighborhoods that were redlined in 1930s and 40s.
Really?
Yes. So it's the same neighborhoods that were denied opportunity to buy a house and increase wealth because the neighborhoods were predominantly Black. And so the federal government had racist policies, and so did the city, 30s, 40s, 50s. And because of that, that has created the poverty. And then the poverty creates violence because there's an alternative economy going on. And, you know, then, I mean, I know, you know, all this, and I know this is not what we're here to talk about.
Keep going.
Yeah.
And it makes me question, then how do we even, you know, come on, kind of break away from that? What is
Yeah. I think the way there's short term and long term, right? The first thing is to acknowledge that is the history. And I talk about that a lot, that the current poverty in our city is caused, it didn't just happen. It's not like the violence didn't just happen in certain neighborhoods. It's because of the lack of opportunity. So the way to fix it is to be very intentional and strategic. And it's something that as mayor, I will make a big priority to invest in our neighborhoods long neglected. That means fixing the schools so that the buildings are clean and safe, so that there's good educational quality. That means library and parks and rec. That means therapy, like behavioral health support for those that are struggling. It means all of the, and economic opportunity. So all of that, we can turn this around. It's going to take a few years, but we need to be intentional. And then there's things we can do in the short term, but doing after school programming is a great beginning step to just creating an environment where kids have something to do.
And I think this also makes me ask, you know, in terms of you trying to plan for, you know, future years and how to kind of break away from this and just, you know, kind of falling back on topic, what could we as Park and Rec do within those zip codes that we are in? And I know we have spoke about, you know, bringing more programs such as art, etc. But what else could we possibly do in terms of that?
Well, that's a great question. And to me, it needs to be sort of a city sponsored and organized initiative to look at Parks and Rec and make sure that the rec centers in our neighborhoods that have the most violence have ample programming, so that we're making sure that, because often it's the other way around. Often when we look at what happens, like for example, the pools in the summer,
Right.
that the pools open in wealthier zip codes sometimes before they open in our poorer areas, which is completely not right. That's a you know, city decision. And that's about breaking down systemic racism, which we need to do. So from your perspective, Parks and Rec, I mean, Parks and Rec runs great programming and is an awesome part of our city organization. I think though that it's going to take some, you know, sort of organizational strategy from the next mayor to make sure that the programming is really equitable across the city.
And so I think this also kind of makes me question too, is not just the inside, let's say not just the inside of the rec center, but even the outside. And so keeping the neighborhoods clean, right? That's something else that rec centers have definitely done, and not only in their own kind of property, but also the surrounding blocks or so on. And so do you think that possibly does play a part within the violence within the city, or just overall with the respect that people have for their own neighborhoods?
Yes, in fact, there have been studies that have shown that cleaning up a neighborhood reduces the violence. And um, that's why I think, I mean, it's so important, and it's part of my platform as mayor that I'll clean the city within the first 100 days. That we can clean the city up. We need not just regular, on-time trash collection, but we need to have consequences for illegal dumping so that contractors don't dump illegally, and that we make sure that we have street cleaning. We're one of the only major cities in the country without regular street cleaning. So yeah, we are. So it doesn't just happen to be dirty, like the city has certain responsibilities that it needs to do. And then I think once the city does that, then we can say we can have almost like a marketing campaign to the public, like, we're keeping it clean. Can you help keep it clean too? And that, I think that'll energize the feeling if the city's doing its part.
I definitely agree. And I even question, so not just with cleaning it, but I know even along with staying on topic of being outside and stuff like that, certain neighborhoods, especially with the neighborhoods that's, a little bit more impoverished and have a little bit more crime activity going, there is, let's say, less trees compared to some of our more peaceful areas. And so does that play a part? Does trees play a part in, the respect, and like, what is the part? And your opinion?
Yeah. So trees in nature are good for our souls, right? Well, they are. I mean, it's nature, right? Nature is good for us. And also the tree canopy helps with so many other things. Hunting Park in North Philly is 20 degrees hotter in the summer than areas of Chestnut Hill. Because of the lack of tree cover. So we do need to increase our tree canopy. Absolutely. And that is something that I would continue and would work towards, that we do need more trees. And the heat becomes oppressive in the summer. So without trees help, they really do. And they are important. And they have been found. Planting trees and greening has been found to reduce violence.
Really?
Yeah, there's a correlation. There is. Which is interesting. I mean, it makes sense on sort of a deeper level, right? But like it does work. It absolutely does work.
Definitely would love to go to deeper levels if we had more time, and probably, there could be a part two eventually one day. But I do now wonder, so if we have our attempts to clean up the streets, plant more trees, have more programs, this kind of gives us an opportunity to create more job openings.
Yeah.
And so is there a way that we could be able to find more ways to not only get youth more out of the streets by putting them in programs, but also by even hiring them for full year positions within, let's just say within Parks and Rec, who's doing majority of the neighborhood cleanup and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And what you're talking about is basically pairing the need for rec programming and greening with a job pathway program.
Right.
Which makes so much sense. And what we need to do is then make sure that there's not requirements for the job that make the people most qualified not able to get it. So for example, sometimes and this has happened in Parks and Rec, where, like, for example, there's a college degree is required for a job, but it might not be necessary to have that college degree to do that job. So that's the type of thing that we need to work through. Because really, if you start to think about it, what you brought up and what we're talking about could be transformational.
Right.
It could be like so many people would have good paying jobs to actually beautify and improve the neighborhood, which is awesome. It's like, a whole paradigm shift in how we operate and how we are as a city.
Yeah, That definitely is true. You know what? I'm gonna throw a curveball question to you.
Okay.
Let's say we have a position that we open up for a team, and let's say the minimum age is what, 16.
Okay.
What would you say would be the pay wage, off the top of your head, that position would be for?
The hourly wage,
Yeah,
15.
15 an hour.
Yeah.
All right. This
Is
is
that,
always curious. There ain't no right or wrong answer, but yeah, I was definitely just
I mean,
curious.
I think 15 an hour should be the minimum wage.
You think
Like,
so?
I do. Yeah.
Fair.
What do you think so?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
definitely think so. Especially when prices going up, because before,
Yeah.
oh, don't raise the minimum wage because it's going to create inflation. However, like prices are already going up and the minimum wage is still the same. So
The minimum wage is way too low. Way too
it
low.
definitely is.
Yeah.
Definitely is. And it's nowhere near enough to really support,
No.
families.
Right. And one job, I mean, as an adult, one job should be enough to support your family. One full-time job. You shouldn't have to be working 2 jobs. I mean, we have to fix the economy, and the minimum wage though is a state law. So we can't change, in the city the minimum wage, but we can decide how much we pay our workers.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. And now, we do have a few minutes left. And so
Okay.
I'm gonna ask one of my final questions. Well, my final question, which is going to be, what are you most proud of so far that you've accomplished?
Well, I think as city controller, I won that office. I became the first woman city controller in the city's history, which is a complete honor. I think with being the city controller, expanding the role of that office beyond the traditional financial watchdog to take on some of our city's toughest challenges, such as gun violence, inhumane prison conditions, the racial inequity in 911 response times across our city. These are all things that I worked on and put out there. And I'm proud of that.
Good. I'm really glad to hear that. And actually, you know what? I have one more. What is
Yes.
the next goal that you want to accomplish that you'll be biggest proud of? Like
The next goal is I want to be the 100th mayor of our city. We have an amazing city. We truly do. Our people, our neighborhoods, our arts and culture, our sports teams. We're a great city, but we need to fix these issues and stop the violence, clean up our city, fix our schools. And that's what I want to do.
And I respect that. And I hope the best of luck for you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming with us today. Really enjoyed talking to you and overall being able to ask questions and hear your answers to them. And
yeah, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem.